Hello and welcome to Technology Updates. The World Cup's over, but if you think you've seen the end of countries going head-to-head in the heat, think again, because we've come to check out the national teams looking for racing glory here in Barcelona. At first glance, the Catalonian capital seems more touristy than techie, but looks can be deceiving. Already home to the world's largest mobile tech conference, in 2013 Barcelona became the birthplace of the Smart Moto Challenge, where teams of engineering students from around Europe came to the city to pit their electric bikes against each other over 4 grueling days. And last year, participants were left eating the dust from Russia's MiG-1. Named after Mikoyan's famous MiG-1 fighter, the bike was designed and built by the Moscow State University of Mechanical Engineering, also known as MAMI. And the university's young guns are raring to use the theory from the classroom to cut their teeth out on the track. Back in 2010, TechUp's Nick Levy followed another team of student speedsters from the uni, competing in the Formula Students competition in Germany. Held in the country's historic Hockenheim Ring, 75 teams from 18 countries rolled into town with their single-seat four-wheel races to take part in the event. Although there was no champagne shower for the Russian team, they did reach the checkered flag despite the tough conditions, which is more than can be said for many of the other teams. But motorsport hasn't been unaffected by the shift towards electric power off-track.
There's demand for electric transport in Europe, where parking space is scarce, fuel is expensive, and the public is concerned about the environment. As participants in this race, we want to support that philosophy and inspire a similar trend in Russia, so that people become more aware of environmental issues, and so that everyone realizes that we only have one planet, and we have to look after it.
Built in 1991, the Circuit de Catalunya has played host to some of the world's most prestigious racing events, and its 16 turns over 4.5 clicks provide a formidable challenge for cars and bikes alike. This month, the track was a hive of activity as big-name teams tinkered, tweaked and tuned their superbikes ready for the 20th 24-hour Catalunya endurance race. Just a stone's throw away in Pit 47, the students are working just as hard to bring their e-bikes up to scratch for tomorrow's inspection. This year, 7 teams from Spain, Poland, Ecuador and Russia are each looking for a place on the podium. Hoping to repeat last year's victory, and in the face of stiffer competition, the MAMI students have come back with a completely new set of wheels. They've dropped the electric bicycle design in favour of a fully-fledged enduro-style motorbike. With only the same headlight as last year's winner, this e-bike has more in common with its combustion engine cousins next door. MAMI's journey to Barcelona started the best part of a year ago. It took around 1 month to put the team together, which is made up of specialists in different fields, but all sharing the same thirst for victory. Then followed 4 arduous months of meticulously planning and modelling each nut, bolt and weld. Once the team had settled on the final tech specs, it was time to stop pencil pushing and get their hands dirty in the workshop. CAD software helped the students measure twice and cut once. Having fully modelled and stress tested their frame and forks virtually, the team knew exactly what to build and how it'd handle on the day. With only a limited budget, the guys had to be crafty about which parts to buy in and which ones to make in-house. They opted for steel tubes for the frame, offering the optimal trade-off between strength, weight and cost. But like anything, the finished product is only as good as its component parts.
We started exploring new opportunities, and we all agreed that it's time we should start using composite materials to produce structural elements. And not only structural elements, but also, for example, a lighter battery box made of composite materials and so on.
A high-tech bike should be made from high-tech materials, and carbon fibre offers the perfect way to shore up the structure without adding precious pounds. Here the team are laying the glistening black strands on an MDF milled mould of their seat. The trick is to achieve the right balance between fibres and resin to make sure the saddle sits just right. The team's clever use of composites means that their electric motorcycle weighs just the same as last year's e-bike. After 9 months of blood, sweat and tears, all that remained for the MAMI team to do was to put the finishing touches on their entry. This year, the rules of the Smart Moto Challenge state that teams have to use motorbike wheels and that it should be big enough for 2 people, in addition to the standard motor, controller and battery given to each team. As well as making it even more difficult to keep weight down, the team has been working twice as hard this year and plans to turn up with an ace up their sleeve. With only a couple of weeks to go before race day, getting their e-bikes running on time was no small task. And it's soon time to find out if their entries perform as well on the track as they do on paper. Back in the Russian camp, tensions building as the first round of scrutineering approaches. The team has toiled through the night in a race against time to get their bikes ready. All the teams have been briefed and they're now in the pits, hard at work preparing their bikes for a tough couple of days ahead. This year the guys from MAMI have 2 entries, the more casual MiG-2 Neutron and the feistier MiG-2 Proton. Both bikes have their strengths and even these guys don't know which one will perform better in the competition. The Proton and Neutron have the same brake system, wheels, motor, battery and onboard controller, but that's about where the similarities end. Weighing in at 43 kilos and with a wheelbase of 1 meter 33 centimeters, the Proton is slightly heavier and longer than its teammate. Its rigid frame and swing arm are built for speed and require a skilled rider, while the Neutron's slightly springy frame makes it more of an easy rider. The Proton's titanium front forks are lighter and can be tuned much more finely than the Neutron's. Its hard, smooth seat lets the rider seamlessly shift from one position to another, whereas the Neutron sacrifices freedom of movement for comfort. It may seem like the calm before the storm, but before these teams are allowed onto this track, their bikes must be scrutinised for compliance with the competition rules, and that's just the first hurdle. They'll also be marked on acceleration, endurance, handling and even their business plan, all of which will go towards their final score. After the e-bikes were tested for watertightness, it was time to progress onto the next stage, which took place on the dynamic testing grounds in the centre of the Circuit de Catalunya track. Here the teams have to prove that their rides are safe in the 3 and 5 metre front and back brake tests. The MiG-2 Proton breezed the test, but the Neutron was hit by a spot of engine trouble. Having made it to the test area under its own steam, at the crucial moment the electric motor refused to spark into life.
Failures mean you could miss a whole day of the competition, and as a result you could miss out on a few tests and lose points. It's never straightforward. You can never be sure what will happen.
Today some of the teams are going to try and turn around yesterday's failures into a success in a last-ditch attempt to get through to the next round. After last night's drama and hours of head-scratching, the team managed to locate and fix the faulty connection that rendered their machine immobile. With both bikes raring to go, it's time for the acceleration test. Here, speed is king as the teams take it in turns to open up the throttle on the 50-metre straight drag. Each entry has 4 attempts at the best time, both with and without a passenger. And just like last year, MAMI's Proton left everyone else standing. Meanwhile, in Barcelona, old-school bike lovers have come from all over Europe to show off their hogs and make some noise. So despite the progress in e-bikes, petrol is far from dead, and Russia has its own offerings for all the petrol heads out there. The Ural is a cult classic. Its retro design and distinctive sidecar have stood the test of time, looking just as good today as they did when they first hit the roads over 70 years ago. The motorbike's success just goes to show that old school will never go out of fashion, and the bike has firmly cemented its niche in the market. Such is the motorbike's appeal that the company ships well over 90% of its bikes abroad. But don't just take my word for it. Brad Pitt was not immune to the motorbike's charm and treated himself to an Ural tourist 3 years ago. Ewan McGregor and Tumblr founder David Karp can also be listed among the A-listers with an Ural in the garage. Back on home turf, or should I say tarmac, the Ural is the chopper of choice of the Night Wolves pack leader Alexander Zaldastanov, also known as the Surgeon. The gang even worked with the manufacturer of the Ural back in the 1990s to create the Ural Wolf.
We have trained up a whole generation of brilliant amateur engineers who have worked on this machine. They've introduced all sorts of innovations to it, from minor improvements to groundbreaking changes. Each of them would first try out their innovations themselves and then share them with their friends.
Pretty much all the Urals on the road today were produced in the town of Irbit in the Urals. By the 1970s, the factory, which was built around an old brewery, had rolled out more than 700,000 of the three-wheelers, whose affordability made them a popular alternative to the car. Strong demand for the Ural outside of Russia meant that the factory hit its peak production of 130,000 bikes per year around this time as well, with the trikes being shipped out to North and Central Africa, Europe, and even as far as Australia. But to find out more about the origins of the Ural, we have to go even further back in time. The history of the Ural began right here in Moscow more than 70 years ago in 1941, the same year that Germany invaded the Soviet Union, shattering the anti-aggression pact between the two countries. The Soviet Union was forced to ramp up production and upgrade its tanks, its planes and its transport, including motorbikes which were used as scouts, defence and for relaying messages. Before the start of the war, the first prototype Ural M72 had already been made. Although it was heavier than its TIZ and PMZ predecessors, it was also faster, more powerful and more reliable. And if you look closely, you'll also notice it bears an uncanny resemblance to the German BMW R71. As part of the Lend-Lease program during World War II, the US supplied the Soviet Union with over 26,000 Harleys and 7,500 Indians. But Russia needed its own upgraded motorbike. By 1945, the Soviet Union had produced almost 10,000 M72s, which were used in the war effort before kicking down a gear into the civilian population. The Ural M72 was an exact copy of the BMW R71, but the history of how this happened isn't clear. One version of events suggests that Germany gave Russia a license to produce the R71 as part of a resource and technology exchange treaty. The alternative is a bit more cloak and dagger. In this one, 5 Beamers were secretly acquired by go-betweens in neutral Sweden and smuggled back into the country where they were reverse engineered by Soviet specialists. It's unlikely that evidence supporting either version still exists, so you'll have to make up your own mind as to which one you prefer. Today, and having avoided any copyright lawsuits, the factory in Irbit is still standing. It currently produces around 1,200 units per year for die-hard fans of the legendary bike around the world. This year's lineup boasts 6 models, including the M70 tribute to the original that kick-started the brand. But no matter which one you choose, they all have one thing in common.
Our motorbike is unique, since it is currently the only bike in the world to come complete with a sidecar. And not just any old sidecar. Our sidecar is now power-driven, which enables the motorbike to run on the open road, as well as cross-country and even off-road.
The driven sidecar effectively turns the Soviet Steed into a full 2-wheel drive vehicle. And behind its retro facade, the steel sidecar can be fitted with modern comforts, including a luggage rack, spare tyre and plug socket, or even an ammo canister for the more adventurous types. The company also ships in components from specialist suppliers in countries such as Germany, Japan, Austria and Italy. The Irbit factory produces 6 bikes a day and has plans to boost production to meet demand from their new markets in New Zealand, China and the Philippines. The company's director and chief engineer both have Urals and insist on testing out the latest innovations on their own bikes.
We researched different areas when developing our powered sidecars. We initially used a differential drive, like the kind they use in cars. But inexperienced drivers face difficulties when steering the motorbike due to a differential drive's specific design features. That's why we made the differential drive switchable, so you can turn it on as you approach an obstacle and then turn it off once you've passed it. We will continue to explore this area in order to attract new customers. A motorbike with a driven sidecar wheel is a rare thing.
The Ural's versatility and character mean it's seen action everywhere from the front line to the streets of Hollywood. The bike's rich history has been over 70 years in the making, and with the factory in Irbit constantly updating and improving its range, the history of the Ural is far from over. That's the end of the first half. We'll see some more two-wheel tech after the break.
Does the media lead us or we lead the media? Privacy versus security. All right, your party, where's it going? The questions that no one is asking with the guests that you deserve answers from. It's all on politicking, only on RT.
Right from the scene. First-rate news and eye-gripping pictures. On our reporters' Twitter and Instagram. To be in the know, follow us online.
It was a terrible mistake, and we're working very hard to make up for it.
Once again, we put something on the air. It's a flat-out lie.
Have you ever had sex with Governor Rick Perry?
No, wait. Do not answer that. I want you to watch what we're about to do because you've never seen anything like this on television.
Just 3 years ago, the European Union was spending several hundred billion of euros on the public procurement, and there are estimations that in each public procurement deal, 20, 30, sometimes even 50% of the money is spent on corruption.
Welcome back. As you can see, the Superbike endurance race is now well underway. So let's find out how the students are getting on with their e-bikes here at the Circuit de Catalunya. The endurance race drew around 26,000 spectators who set up camp for the long haul ahead. Out on the track, man and machine were being pushed to their limits in the opening hours of the race. Anything's possible in such a long event, and the withdrawal of the leading Yamaloupe-Folch endurance team in the early hours of the morning left the way wide open for the French team Hal Motos 2 to take the trophy, covering an impressive 729 laps. Behind the pits, life moves at a slower pace, with teams and their crews enjoying some well-deserved downtime. We are now 6 hours into the Superbike endurance race, but I'm afraid that I can't endure listening to that racket any longer. Luckily, there's a greener and silent alternative taking place right now. In the Smart Moto endurance race, the teams must complete 20 laps of the course, covering 10.5 kilometers. They should do 10 laps solo and 10 with a passenger and swap drivers halfway through. The goal here is consistency, not speed, so the time difference between the two drivers has to be as small as possible, probably to stop teams from getting one of the professionals next door to do it for them. As you can see, bikes and scooters are in demand in Moscow, but as with any petrol-powered machine, the environment is always a concern. However, that creates a niche in the markets for green newcomers. Pavel Voitov was Russian pit bike champion in 2013 and has played an active part in promoting the sport in Russia. Having reached the top of his game, he's now looking for new ways to get his kicks. Pavel's found a new toy to play with, but don't be fooled by its size. This mighty electric Mini can hold its own against much larger petrol bikes, as Pavel found out when he took it to the races.
It's much easier to steer this motorbike because it's very light, much lighter than bikes that run on petrol. It's a big advantage. We tried it out in the second stage of the Russian Pit Bike Championship. I pulled away from my opponents right from the start and then completed the first lap faster than anyone else. I deliberately left the track after that because it was just a demonstration. I wanted to show people how powerful a small motorbike can be. It accelerates extremely fast, and I don't think a petrol engine will ever be able to do anything like that. It also only has one gear, while with petrol motorbikes you need to change gear, and every split second it takes you to change gear is important in a race. So this gives you maximum possible acceleration. It's amazing, really one of a kind.
The e-bike is made in Moscow by Della. The secret behind its killer characteristics is all in the motor, which despite weighing just 4.8 kilograms, generates 9 kilowatts of power, which is then fed directly to the wheel. The company also built the frame, battery packs, controller and software to go with it.
The engines that are currently on the market surprised me, because they were also heavy, but not that powerful. So we made some prototypes. Right from the start, we made up our mind to use air cooling, which requires much fewer parts. Inside the engine, there's a fairly powerful air current that transfers heat from the hot components to the outer body, where it cools naturally by the wind. Moreover, the efficiency of our engine is about 90%, so it generates much less heat anyway.
However, the electric bike has generated a lot of buzz. So much so that Della has already designed 3 other models, including 2 full-sized motocross bikes and an urban version that's at the prototype stage. The first batch of 100 is due this winter and has already been snapped up, with the full-sized urban model having a predicted range of 200 kilometers on a single charge, which costs between 35 and 70 cents. It's easy to see why. But it's no good having all these top specs if the bike doesn't look the part. So Della got in touch with Moscow-based industrial design company Artup for a helping hand. The designers drew up countless concepts for a motocross-style bike before they eventually agreed on the final version.
It doesn't weigh a gram more than it has to. We've simply removed all the non-load-bearing parts. There's also our original design, which allows us to have high engine capacity combined with small size and, most importantly, lightweight.
Even in this day and age, computer models sometimes aren't enough fully to evaluate a design. So Artup uses industrial plasticine to bring their drawings to life and get an impression of the final product. After hours of sticking and pressing, Della's urban motocross bike is beginning to take shape. Vladimir has been riding bikes since he was a child and uses extensive experience to make sure the bike is practical as well as pretty. The first rendering was a bit too wide and bulky, but after a few pointers the right balance had been reached. There are other e-bikes on the block, including the Zero FX from California and Austria's KTM Freeride E. The top spec FX has a 133 kilometer range, weighs 120 kilos and costs $12,000. The KTM on the other hand has a much smaller battery capacity, giving it a runtime of between 20 to 90 minutes and costs $13,500. When the Della's finished, it's expected to be faster, lighter and less than half the price. The inevitable rise in oil prices is only going to spark advances in energy storage technology, making it both more efficient and affordable. And once the battery bottleneck has been broken, e-bikes are going to go faster and further than ever before. It's the final day of the Smart Moto competition right here in the heart of Barcelona. There's not much between the teams, so there's still everything to go for in this final handling test. In this closing event of the Smart Moto Challenge, the teams have to show off the maneuverability of their machines by weaving in and out of the cones. Just like in the endurance test, consistency is key, and the teams are penalised for every cone they hit or miss. Meanwhile, the judges took the opportunity to have a closer look at the innovative solutions used in the team's bikes during the design appraisal. The MAMI team seemed to be doing pretty well in the dynamic tests, and their Proton was fastest when pitted directly against the other e-bikes.
Moscow students has no limit for working. They are working night by night, day by day, and maybe they forget eat something along the day. They are a very, very strong students.
Smart Moto Challenge 2014 is now over, and as Emilio tots up the final totals, all the students can do is sit and wait. This year's winners were Poland and Ecuador, with the People's Friendship University of Russia picking up a special prize for bravery. MAMI didn't receive anything, so we caught up with Emilio and Pablo to find out what happened.
The potential of your students in Moscow and also on its design. But, well, in Mediterranean Sea area, like Barcelona, judges are thinking in scooters, not in motorbikes.
The rules just say you have to create a smart moto. They don't specify whether it should be a scooter or a full-size motorbike. They only say it has to be a smart one.
It's a question of opinion, not of technology, because I'm sure that technology is equal or better than others.
But there are also technical tests, of which we won every one, and yet we still failed to qualify. And that's what is a complete mystery to us.
Ah, well, it wasn't meant to be this year, but life goes on. The MAMI students may not have won in Barcelona, but they have won a deal with their sponsor, Universal Motors, that could see their bikes ride into mass production soon.
We like large cars and large motorbikes. That's why we've used the motorcycle riding position and design as the basis for our e-bike concept. These bikes will go into mass production. The bike parts will be produced according to our designs. We'll receive them at our manufacturing facility and assemble the bikes to meet the specifications or end customers.
So who knows, perhaps the streets of Moscow will be buzzing with the sound of the Proton and Neutron's electric motors sometime soon. Unlike this month's show, the story of the bike is far from over, and it looks like it has a bright electric future. So we'll see you next month, and until then, enjoy the ride.